Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Talk with the CEO, the podcast where we dive into leadership, impact, and the big ideas shaping our world of IHF. I am your host, Salsabel, and as always, I am joined by my lovely co hosts, Athmar and Diana. How are you guys doing today? Athmar?
Beautiful. It's been a beautiful day, so I feel wonderful. Thank you.
Spectacular. And you, Diana, how's this day looking for you?
I'm fine. I'm very good today. I hope you're good too.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I am. I feel wonderful. Um, so I yeah, but before heading into this episode of today, quick check-in. It's February 2025. We are officially in the thick of the new year. Um, and it does have that fresh start energy, and we're already drowning in the new year, same chaos vibes sometimes. Um, we are officially joined by Carol Sasaki, the visionary founder and CEO of the International Humanity Foundation. Carol, thank you and welcome back to the podcast. How are you feeling this? Well, I guess it's morning for you. It's afternoon, evening for us, but good morning, Carol.
Hi, sweetie. How am I feeling? Well, I was feeling rushed and kind of racing the minutes and trying to outrun the minutes to keep up with unrealistic schedules I always set for myself. But I'm breathing now and relaxing into this time with you.
Thank you. Yes, we love to hear that. So Carol, first things first, how are you feeling? Well, I guess it's already been 2 months. I guess time flies, but how are you feeling stepping into 2025? And when you envisioned 2025 back in December, let's take a time machine and go back to December. What were the biggest goals that you had set for IHF? Are we on track, or has reality lifted some of these expectations?
Honey, are you speaking of for IHF? Which is wonderful because I know Doris, I had sent her that in late November, early December. And she was wanting kind of an update of that for her newsletter. And I had suggested she do it through the podcast time here. So, whether you talked with her or not, your question is perfect if it's about IHF. Is that what it's about, sweetie?
Yes, yes, of course it's by more, yeah, the biggest goals that you had set for IHF in terms of
Got it.
exactly, yes, this the
Great.
goals that you had. I mean, we all have our personal goals as well, and they do coincide with IHF many times, but specifically for yes, for IHF.
Perfect question. Wonderful question. Love it. So for IHF, goal is to kind of a goal we've always had, but with changes in inherited condition here, it's more forefront as a light blinking in 2025, and that is for IHF to learn enough to not be CEO dependent and to be seeking and working with potential um, people to come on should anything happen to me, and to get information that is difficult to get online, pertaining to various tribes I've worked with, to rescues, to when you're working with all volunteers from around the world, and yet it affects communities. Very specific information. Um, it's my job to get that down somewhere. And so that's that Institute of Learning, for IHF, the IHF Institute of Learning, we're going to try to make part of our website. And I don't know if that can be done in 2025 or not, but that certainly is a goal. And under that goal, as steps to getting that goal, is the new online full time GLD program. So the goals of IHF for 2025 are the centers, which I'll go into, number one. And number two, even more important because it will keep the centers going for years, is the IHF Institute of Learning. So people throughout the world are learning the same lessons, can start their own nonprofits wherever they are, or enter into nonprofits being of much more help than they would be otherwise with a knowledge base for those wonderful nonprofits. And then, besides the Learning Institute, number three, which is the step to number one and two, is improving the online GLD, full time GLD program, as well as part time and half time. That does not exclude our at home volunteers, because number four is under the leadership and skills of the GLD to improve the access and experience um, that at home volunteers have. The difference between GLD and at home is that an at home volunteer online, or a LV, local volunteer near our centers, they are signing up with a specific team and skill they're wanting to practice and learn, and no more, because to do more would create a lot of stress for them in their lives at this time. And they can help immensely by doing that one team, as well as learning a lot and sharing. It's just not doing it all at once. Whereas with your GLD, that's literally becoming a student, and it's a demanding student role. It is like being in graduate school, where you're not in undergraduate school just kind of learning and mimicking and memorizing basics, but you're in graduate school where you're learning what questions to ask, how to see from a bird's eye view, a distance, so you can do data statistics required of graduate school. And becoming a GLD is similar in that you're learning leadership school skills that require um, skills of handling larger viewed items. So you're preventing the problems before the problems come. You're aware of potential problems and have the tools, communication and charting and tracking and other skills needed to do that. So that's a GLD, and there are quarter time GLD, but even that requires 8 to 10 weeks. We say 10 weeks, we give out 8 because there's always miscellaneous time used up. And that's a lot of time for people to donate every week, a lot of time in our busy lives. And then half time, who then go on to be full time often. Half time are even more, 18 to 20 hours. And once they've learned enough, they often, if they express the desire, go on to full time. Full time GLD, we give a very small, no salary. It's not a job, it is a learning experience, but we give a small per diem that starts at 35 a month and goes on up until executive training at that starts at 250 USD a month. And that per diem is to allow people that full time needed for that study and learning, so that it's not only the wealthy that can afford to learn that and do that. So that's the GLD program. And the Learning Institute that we want to be a part of our website is taken off from the learning that we teach the GLD. It's just done step by step. So if it's communication skills, it's using those recordings and lessons and the tests required to go on to the next level and next level, so that we're going we're going deeper into communication skills, learning to handle hiring, firing, learning to handle conflict, all kinds of areas of communication, cultural norms, etc. And the same goes for how you graph and track your members and who's doing what, and the vital importance of knowing about them, their unique skills and interests. How do you keep that organized? And how do you motivate your members in a way that is honest, true, validating, and gives uh, not just asking for feedback in a safe way for feedback, but implements feedback? That's a lot. It's a lot to learn and do. So we take it in steps, in areas, in teams, and legal aspects, etc. We take that in lessons, and then you are given the next access to the next lesson after you have answered questions that would be unique for you in that area. And that's the Learning Institute that we plan to implement on the website. But again, while it's a goal for 2025 to incorporate that onto the website in order to free me and free others like Emil and Ade and Ayu, others who have been with us for many years, Lisa, et cetera, that they're not constantly repeating and answering the same questions. It will relieve us a lot. At the same time, I think it will benefit people who may not have time to actually volunteer for IHF but want to learn the lessons. At least the information is there and accessible to all. So that's the goal. In short, the goal for 2025 is to have the Learning Institute on the website, if possible, to have the GLD online program, write grants, try to get that funded better if possible, and proceed with that training for online GLD, and to have the generally the at-home volunteers and local volunteers feeling good about what they're learning from the GLD, who lead the different teams or take on leadership roles themselves as they've been with a team for long enough and feel not stressed to do so. Um, that that is the goal. Funding, of course, IHF has to continue always with the funding aspect, but we don't want and never have had uh, funding from one source that would then inhibit our freedom and ability to be very natural and open about the mistakes everyone is going to make and always makes in order to be a learning institute. And we don't want to be under one grant or one where we have to look successful, we have to look okay. Um, we want to keep that norm of small donors all over, in addition to grants for specific projects, so that we continue year after year, no matter what. And we can say, all right, this is what we did, and it didn't work, and here's what we learned. That freedom has been delicious, and we don't want to lose that. Does that answer kind of the specific goals for 2025, or is it too broad?
No, they're not broad at all. I mean, I feel like many times broader goals are in a way better because they allow much wiggle room. Um, and yeah, it's always fascinating to see how a year unfolds. There's a lot of unexpected challenges, but um, yes, I like to see that these goals are also to expand IHF and be more inclusive. I love the fact that you said that more volunteers would be able to be a part of IHF in giving the stipend, being more accessible in terms of the ease and facilitation of recruiting more volunteers and learning and being online with the GLD. So it's absolutely amazing that these are also goals that are to make the IHF family bigger, better, and constantly innovating and improving.
You know, there is another goal that they're going to say, oh, Grandma, you left this out, and shame on me. And it would be so accurate. I forgot about the volunteers. We haven't been bringing overseas GLD to our centers since the pandemic because there was so much work on the building sitting there empty for 2 years as we weren't allowed to have children there. And in Indonesia, Bali, it's even worse. Thailand went through an earthquake that broke the foundation in addition during that time. So we have had a big delay in allowing GLD and volunteers, folks who are going to be in the country or want to come to the country and spend part of their time staying at the center and volunteering and going on tours, etc., with the community at the center for a more real experience. We haven't opened that, and we do hope to open that in 2025. Ade, one of our grown children, and Ayu, who are now, oh my goodness, entering middle age, but they started as the young children I love so, have said that Indonesia can open for volunteers and GLD from other countries now. And Kenya has been fixing the building so it can now open and assure a good experience for them. So again, we don't know if we don't want to open anything until we're sure that it's going to be a good experience for people, because innate in the learning and experience is often a kind of a cultural shock if they're working with the country's poorest and most in need. And we have to be very careful that there's a loving eh, environment and not too many shocks physically in terms of comfort, because they'll already have enough, especially if they're going out and working with nomadic or working with inner slum. That's already enough where the brain is going da 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 da, and the brain kind of gets tired. So we want to make sure that other aspects are cushioned. Having done this for so many years, we've really learned that. So if we can, then that's the other goal, is to start and invigorate bringing groups of university students back again. That was a major source of income for the centers, and needed income. But again, we don't want to do it unless we're certain it will be a good experience for those coming. That's the volunteerist legacy. We call it the legacy program, where people come and they volunteer to teach guitar or teach whatever their career and hobby is to the community. We announce it to the community before they arrive, and there's always a huge amount of people wanting to learn, of course, whether it's learning how to develop your own website, or opera singing, or violin playing, or um, uh, ecology for the environment. They're often shocked to see how littered and plastic and polluting, and they decide what they want to do as the workshop while they're there. And it's just a few hours on one day. Sometimes they want to do more because of the enthusiasm, and the rest of the time they're mainly there as a tourist having the experience. But we call that legacy. And the reason we do is they truly do leave a legacy. There have been so many children who have said, I became passionate about wanting to sing opera, or wanting to play the guitar or violin, or wanting to become a cook from Rosemary when she came. Or one, it was Tesh. I became passionate about wanting to join the Rotary internationally and become involved from when Tesh came and talked about what she did as a female in a very male organization and how it's helped her. That legacy, whatever it is the foreigners bring, we have found has a long term impact we never expected. So it will be wonderful if we can do that again. But I also don't want to stress the GLD, because the online GLD program is only 1 year old. Now, we've been doing GLD for, my goodness, 20 years, and actually 40 years under the SAVE title, and 20 years under the IHF division of SAVE. But doing it all online instead of half the time online, half at center, that's new. and we're constantly improving different areas as it is. So I don't want them stressed by forcing our old programs to open up too soon on them. And we'll have it as a goal, and we'll see how the river flows.
Grandma Carol, you have so many beautiful and wondrous projects. I'm actually curious, was there a time, either in 2024 or even before, that you wanted to invest in a project, or maybe you started investing in a project or initiative and then realized down the line that it was either too much, that either you had to maybe regroup or maybe kind of change your idea for that plan? And if so, was there kind of a crystal clear moment where you had to kind of maybe say, even, I just give up for now?
There's only one time in IHF that occurred, and it didn't occur under me and wouldn't have, but it's an important point to bring up. I want to say, though, that the only reason that there is only one time that we had a project where that happened is only because, remember, before IHF, I had 20 years of doing IHF in essence under SAVE, until we didn't want to combine volunteers with trafficked children and rescues, just too dangerous. And fortunately, we separated them before anyone was harmed. But that is why. Also, I did the home project in the US and had phenomenal mentors. The governor of my state, uh, my boss Chuck Hobbs at the White House, Bill, when Bill was still the head of the National Governors Association. He wasn't president yet. So between Bill Clinton and Chuck Hobbs, um, and um, and Booth, uh, Governor Booth in Booth Gardner in Washington State, and Celeste in Ohio State, where we had moved. They were all incredible mentors who taught me um, some norms that protected me. Otherwise, I would have had this problem far more often. So, the problem I had in IHF was in Banda Aceh, and Banda Aceh had the war with GAM, and in between GAM and Indonesia, and both sides made sense, and both sides get angry when I say that. And great validity. But you had a lot of orphans, and because of war, as you always do, just like in Kenya, many of the orphans came from tribal wars. Um, and so there was a great need, and we had some directors who came from Aceh, and one had his business bombed, and was very anti-GAM. And then we had another that was family grown in Aceh and was very pro-GAM, because look at how they've stolen our land, and we didn't enter the contract as an island with Indonesia without this specification, and the US has tricked us in order to have these oil rights, and Indonesia and the US kind of took over. So we hate the US, and we're fighting. And you could see both volunteers impassioned, and both were so correct in their passion. And so we thought, we'll bring them together the way we have the political opposites in the US, and say, let's just focus on the orphans, whichever side they're from, only the children, and only want love for these children. So we'll only talk the language of love. So we were going into a precarious situation as it was. And then the tsunami hit. And we had already started the house when the tsunami hit. I was on the phone with the children when it hit, and when so many were lost, and we had to immediately, end up spending months cleaning bodies instead. And that led to later, when I could not be there living constantly, the directors, especially one, talking with our US board. It's always political when you end something, almost always, environmental and political around it. Um, that led to this person kind of saying, well, how awful that they want the females and males separated and we can only have one or the other, and that's against the rules. So we're going to close it. And the more extremist is Islamic community saying, but Carol, where's Carol? She needs to live here because she would respect our our needing to have them separated and not demand that we change our culture. And we're not going to work with you unless and I couldn't be living there. And so there became tension within the culture. In fact, similar of my health thing is similar, where my mother suddenly had heart problems. I needed to be with her, and I had some situations myself going on that whenever you are not present, um, at the center living, you do not know and can't know, and it cannot be voiced safely, the fine invisible threads that have so much strength and are being pulled. So you can't just believe and listen to any viewpoint. Impossible if you're not living there, and if you do not create communication channels from the top to the lowest level, but you have them go through the different levels, you're making yourself inept. Always, always. And if you're dependent on those independent individual levels to get your information because you're so busy and you can't do otherwise, you are not going to get accurate information ever, anywhere. I don't care if it's at the White House, if it's one of our centers. It is the nature of being alive and human. It won't happen. And it won't be safe or right of you to ask, and you will be lied to, and it won't be their fault. So that in Aceh, the gentleman basically let the place run down, which is a big problem, run down, and didn't keep it up because he felt discouraged and felt kind of at war. And having those communication skills, basically the cheesy thing of, if we don't somehow love each other and express that, even if they can't be loving, we're not going to get anywhere, and it will just disintegrate into nothing. And those skills were not practiced, and they wanted to just sell the center, use the center for the other centers, and close the project. And these are extremist Islamic. There is no point in it. And they closed it and sold the place. So it was a decision I did not agree with. And a part of me wanted to say it was my money that bought the place, and I'm CEO, and I'm going to override it. But everyone felt that way so strongly outside of that community that I felt it was important we do it as a vote, and those in Indonesia be a part of that vote, or this war is going to continue. And that my job was to make sure the individual children that had started young, that were still in communication with me and older, if they wanted my help, would be receiving my help. And so that's an example of where there was a project, and the only time I've had that happen where it was kind of closed. And another example could be Thailand, in that I had to separate, save the rescues, which had started in 1983 and 84. And we started the first rescue homes with Cunha Canita. I couldn't close SAVE, and I had to pick between SAVE and IHF because unfortunately, we had some volunteers who came in who weren't horrible people, but they ended up without permission involving themselves in SAVE, and that had horrible repercussions for some of the tribes and especially the females in them. And I had to make sure the two were kept completely separate. So I kind of went silent to make sure the children who had been rescued children who were former sex slaves or had been taught to traffic females by their families and were now with us, that I had enough time, even though they were children of IHF, for them to grow into adulthood, and I would continue working with my SAVE children and communities and keep IHF quiet. Um, and so that it was something necessary to do, and I'm glad I did it because it worked, though not glad that the center has gone to pieces after the earthquake and non-care. So that would be kind of two negatives that I don't really see as a negative because they had positive results. The money from the center kept Indonesia going through the pandemic that we didn't know was going to happen. But in answer to your question, they were two examples. Now, earlier examples I've learned to be very, very careful of starting new projects and not over promising, not making goals we don't know what will happen and if we can't keep, and focusing on small steps and growth and a deep belief. I mean, we have it on the website. I really believe, well, kind of like we've learned in science, you break an atom down to its smallest and purest, and it becomes the most powerful tool in the world, which unfortunately can be used for war and atomic bombs and everything else, but it becomes your greatest power. And I do believe you do something small with the right motive, and you do that small step, breathing, looking at it, pouring your best into that small step. And those deep roots have huge, long lasting power rather than to grow big and promise big, and then burn out. And I've seen it too often in too many organizations, and fortunately have had wise mentors cautioning me and teaching me. Does that answer?
Absolutely. I think slow and steady wins the race. And like you said, I think instead of starting huge major projects, sometimes just focusing on little ones, making sure that those are going really well, and then slowly expanding is also better in the long run,
And you
especially.
don't need this mentality of you need big to impress. And it becomes angry and full of hate. You don't need to do big in your life to do long lasting, meaningful. The lives that I can experience that are now grown adults that have such impact on their communities, those children that are now grown give me the deepest, quietest, most peaceful sense of joy that no big thing could give. Yes, legislation I've put through in my past, it was big and it affected the entire country and huge people. But you know what? That legislation I was so attached to each time and put everything into and was so big and needed 250,000 people behind it every day for a year and blah, blah. That legislation just got turned over by other people and time and politics. We don't as long as the person in front of you, as long as your motivation is you get your joy from helping this world be a better place. And if you don't experience the beauty and the love of this world, how can you do that? Then you give yourself more space. There's always enough time within that wanting to grow deep roots and just being worried about the moment in front of you while learning to think long term with the bird's eye view. There was another question, and I'm going to have to end. That's what that alarm was. I wanted the full hour, and unfortunately, don't have because of another situation. Speaking of time, and so may I answer any other question that you have so I don't leave you with unanswered questions?
Oh, yes, depending on how much time you have, but I think you've answered all the questions we had beautifully. I just, on the topic of love and compassion, is something that we mentioned. That was the topic of our discussion last week. And you've dealt with so much tragedy and the incredibly difficult work of handling victims with dignity. In moments like that, where the weight of human loss is overwhelming, how do you personally navigate the balance between getting the job done, being efficient, being focused, and still acting with your heart? And I guess an additional slight question to that is, in being empathetic, how do you perhaps advise or suggest others practicing empathy like that, practicing empathy in order to be more efficient?
Um, I I am not the best person to answer that, but because, or without hypocrisy, but because I've been able to keep going and haven't burnt out, um, I will attempt. And my answer is you can't. That there will be times you shut down. And when those horrific things happen, where you're left as a deer in the headlights and you're aware that whatever it is you're experiencing, a part of you will always be in this moment, and that terrifies you because of the ugliness of that moment. You can't ask yourself, you can go into automatic that functions because it knows what to do and it's been trained. But at some point, your brain, your body, your very cells are going to be that 2-year old that you babysit or you've given birth to that sits on the ground and won't move. And you can't even get out of the restaurant or the store or because they'll scream at a height. Your very being becomes that 2-year old. And you can't ask yourself, your glory is in not being a saint. Your preciousness is in the worst of you and learning to love that and allow it to grow. The ugliest thing that can be, the most demented and strange and perverse and creepy thing that can be, is to ask yourself to be some kind of saint or anyone else. It is creepy. And what is so gorgeous about every day that's birthed new is the worst part of you. And I know that sounds bizarre, but the older I get, the more it brings tears of joy to me. And the more the worst in human beings, and then seeing that grow at all, there is something so sacred in that. That's where the bliss is. And I know that sounds strange, but that's from an old lady. That's where the bliss is. And if you force yourself beyond your boundaries, how can you love or be respectful to anyone else? You are going to have times where the ugliness you will see, and you will see ugliness from yourself too, that you won't want to admit to and you won't want to see. And you will certainly see it in others. The worst of it for me that is symbolized, that I really have had to kind of rest and come to understand, is when I was hiding in the bushes because Ramu had diverted the police so I could escape in Mumbai, which was called Bombay then. And I couldn't keep running. I had to duck under the bushes because the police were there. And one of the policemen, one of the head, came out on that porch, not knowing I was under the bushes and thinking he would see me at any time. And he literally masturbated with a look of sheer joy and grinning on his face as the young girl we were trying to rescue was inside the building, which I was no longer in. I escaped thanks to Ramu. But as she and Ramu were being tortured and screaming to their no longer being able to scream, he had joy on his face. He was getting pure joy from their pain and masturbating sexually on that porch to it. And I have to understand that that part of me that is still forever in those bushes and will forever be trying to rescue Ramu and the little girl whose name I never knew, and Ramu who gave his life to make sure I would escape, knowing, not because he cared about me, but knowing as a Westerner I had more power to help others and do something. That I have to know that a part of my body will always be in those bushes, terrified of the ugliness that can, that ugly creates ugly creates ugly. That fear creates fear, that policeman somehow in his childhood, somehow in his story, became so abused that the only time he feels alive is when he can reconnect with that part of him that stopped being a human when that pain existed. So he only feels joy and alive when there is pain and released from his own. I can't tell myself to ignore that part of me in those headlights and that ugliness, whether it's that extreme or just someone treating me badly, whatever it is that triggers into that extreme. And it's nothing, but it triggers. I can't tell myself to react properly. All I can do is tell that person, I'm not reacting the way I want to react right now, and I won't. So I need to remove myself. But that's not your fault. I can't discuss this. If I discuss this with you right now, I'm going to only hurt you and hurt myself. It's not your fault, but I need to remove myself and go quiet right now. And then I have to go quiet. Sometimes it's going quiet, as in going out and taking a walk with nature. Sometimes I can't even do that. Beauty is too painful. I have to turn on some TV show or some often I don't have a TV around, so I can't do that. So escape into some book. I have to divert until whatever in me is calms down. And I have to respect that, not be the boss of all the parts of me, not say I'm going to play God over all the parts of me. All I can do is remove myself and give myself that space, knowing I won't react properly if I don't. So any other answer would be hypocritical of me, and I apologize for that. You always ask such lovely, lovely questions, and I can't thank you enough. I'm going to have to jump off quickly, I'm afraid.
No
Thank you so
problem.
much, Carol.
Thank you so much. You always give such refreshing answers. This has been a very powerful conversation. We've explored the depths of empathy, the balance between heart and logic, and the resilience it takes to keep going in such a work domain. But beyond reflection, there's also action, because the work isn't finished. And there's so much more to be done in this year of 2025. Looking forward, one of the biggest goals for IHF is expansion, not just in reach, but in impact. So bringing in more people, more voices, more perspectives, to carry this mission forward, because change does not happen in isolation. So to anyone listening who has ever wondered how they can make a difference, the answer is simple: step in, show up, and start wherever you are. There's room for you here. Thank you so much, Carol, for sharing your wisdom and experiences with us today. And of course, a massive thank you to my incredible co-hosts, Athmar and Diana, for always bringing in such insight and depth to these conversations. To everyone listening, thank you for being a part of this journey. Keep leading with empathy, keep striving for change, and we will see you next time on Talks with the CEO.